I'm the Associate Director for the Cognitively Based Compassion Training Program at Emory University, and we may have a chance to hear more about that in a moment. It's housed at the Center for Contemplative Science and Compassion-Based Ethics at Emory, and it's a pleasure to be a moderator for this discussion with our distinguished panelists today. We are going to hear from Lexie Potamkin, Charles Raison, and Lobsang Tenzin Negi. And we're going to give each one of them a few minutes to just speak about their experience with meditation and resilience in light of these challenging times. So welcome to the webinar. Let me introduce Lexie Potamkin, author, speaker, and interfaith minister. You can read about her, and you probably have read about her. I'll just say it's wonderful to be collaborating with her in this way, in this format, but I'm going to keep it brief and pass it to you, Lexie. Thanks for coming, and
pleasure.
Good to see you.
Thank you. I was just going to start out by talking a little bit about my own personal journey, finding resilience and meditation in my own life. I grew up with a very tightly knit family. We were very, very close. I'm the youngest. I have an older brother and sister. And when I was 20 years old, my father died. And it was one of the most difficult, challenging times of my life, being the youngest. And my father was really my first wisdom teacher. He embodied green Tara, compassion and love. And losing him was really, really difficult. But it put me on a spiritual path. And many years later, I wrote, What is Spirit? What is Peace? What is Love? What is Death? And what is Laughter? And I was able to interview 750 people from all walks of life and really connect on a very deep, heartfelt level with these people, which is why I subtitle my books Messages from the Heart, because I think to answer those profound questions, you have to move from your head to your heart. And then the monks and Geshe-la walked into my life over 20 years ago. You can show that slide. And they opened my heart and my mind to new possibilities. And so crises can be an opportunity to shift human consciousness and embrace our shared humanity. When my father died, I started thinking, my goodness, people die and people deal with this. And I need to learn how to deal with that. And in many ways, COVID is a crisis in our lives. You know, we're grieving our old way of life. And in our lifetime, I feel that we do have many, many deaths, and learning to let go is very important. You know, your pets die, you lose your job, you go through divorce, and yet those are opportunities for self-discovery. It's our internal world that guides us through, I think, the darkest times in our lives. It has for me, and compassion and love are qualities that shine within us. So we cannot control our circumstances, but I do feel we can learn to have positive attitudes and thoughts, and that's primarily through meditation. And people ask me all the time, how can I start a practice? And I go, well, start with 15 minutes a day, and 15 minutes at night. There's lots of apps out there that you can find guided meditations. There's timers like Insight Timer or the timer on your phone. Maybe when you're picking up your kids, you can sit there and meditate for 15 minutes. It's taking that time out for yourself and going within. And you can start a practice anytime. It's cumulative and it matters, and it has changed my life. Self-awareness can equip us for life. And if we stay open-minded and we get to know ourselves, that's the name of my new book, Know Yourself, and spend time defining your goals of who you are, what really matters, what's really, really important to you, I think you'll create a happier life for yourself. It's worked for me. And I think when you get to know yourself, you want to embrace the good and the bad and accept yourself for who you are and love who you are. And when you do that, you can love and accept other people. I was thinking about green Tara today because I feel like my father embodied love and compassion and healing. And the monks, of course, this week are building green Tara Mandala, you know, Om Tare, Tu Tare, Tu Re, So Ha. And that final word, soha, means establishing the root of the path within your heart. And so when I think about my meditative practice, it's my anchor, it's my core. It keeps me balanced during the most challenging of times in my life. People often say, what religion are you today? And I go, well, I'm an enthusiastic. And that's because I include everybody, or I try to. And if I was a tree, I guess my trunk would be Christian and Buddhist, but my branches would be Hinduism and Judaism and Sufism and different traditions that I've been very fortunate to study. So I just think about all that and the things that I've learned, and it's really been going within and having this incredible experience with the monks and Geshe-la, and having a very open mind of learning about other traditions that add so much richness to my own life and my own spiritual journey. And then I think about our closing ceremony. You know, the doctrine of impermanence says that nothing will last forever. And when you think about that, you want to stay grateful and you want to stay present in the here and now. And it's really, that's all that matters, of being here for each other and being present and listening. And you can learn from everyone in life. That's one thing I learned from putting my books together. You can learn from street people, from dignitaries. Everyone's a wisdom teacher. And so I encourage people to go within and discover themselves, discover who they are, and make themselves happy. We all have that ability.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Lexi, for that wonderful opening statements. Encouragement, very encouraging, very promising, and reminding us about the possibility of the silver lining in the clouds that we're experiencing. So I really appreciate that. The next panelist I want to introduce, Charles Raison. Chuck is interested in meditation as much as Lexi, but from a very different angle, as we'll certainly find out soon. He's a scientist, a psychiatrist, been studying many types of human activity, really, and its effects on mental health for many years. He's one of the first people I met when I joined the team at Emory about 7 years ago. And since then, he's traveled an illustrious path through other universities, landing now at University of Wisconsin-Madison, leading a lab there. So thanks for joining us, Chuck, and I'll pass it to you.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, hi, everybody. You know, it's interesting. I was trying to think of what to say, and you know, I'm these days I'm often known as a depression researcher. People, unless they've heard me talk about it, don't really realize that it was in fact meditation that led me to research, not the other way around. I was a psychiatrist. I'd come to medicine a little bit late in life. I was a psychiatrist. I was doing clinical work in Southern California at UCLA. And in my kind of mid-late 30s, I hit a little rough patch. I had a breakup of a couple of relationships that as you were talking about, Lexi, were a stressor. They opened me up. And I was standing in lines at a Borders, and I saw a little bitty book by Pema Chodron. And just on a whim, I picked it up. And I think I had gotten to the age where the sort of Buddhist understandings of the mind and how mental activity creates, you know, happiness and suffering, and many things that seem fairly straightforward to me theoretically, but, you know, this many years ago, and as a young dude, it just blew my mind. And I had this experience of realizing for the first time how much, when I looked in my mind, it was just this sort of chaos, that there were these constant arising of these just thoughts. And I really had this, again, it sounds kind of cliche, but I had this shocking realization that, oh my God, all I ever do is think about myself. And unfortunately, I made a lot of progress on that, but it was a real showstopper for me. And I got so interested in this idea of, well, you know, what can we do to help ease the suffering caused by the mind? And so being a psychiatrist, of course, I was seeing that suffering all over the place and all the time. And I was seeing it not just in the mind, but also in the body. So I always had this interest in how brain and body, mind and body work together. And much like Lexi, you know, I came into the Tibetan Buddhist world, and after about a year in it, met Geshe Lobsang, had some crazy ideas, moved to Atlanta, and started up this whole line of research around, especially around compassion meditation, although there's so many interesting practices that await being looked at. And there's a rather beautiful symmetry between meditation, biology, evolution, and where we are right now with COVID. So maybe, Tim, if you can put up the slide, let me kind of walk through what I think gets at, or is like an overview of why meditation is helpful, in particular, something I hope we talk about more, compassion-based meditation. So mindfulness is a doorway to these compassion practices, but these are practices that specifically encourage us to do mental work to try to enhance and enlarge our compassion. So if you go ahead and hit the next button, it's got some builds on it here. Okay. So chronic stress, you know, humans have always had chronic stress, but chronic stress has gotten to be more of a problem probably in the modern world. You know, we evolved to be creatures who had these very strong episodic stressors. You know, the tiger would jump out of the bushes, or, you know, you'd come down with a very serious illness and you'd live or you'd die in either cases. But in our world, even though generally we have a lot of physical safety, we have a lot of this sort of chronic stress, and a lot of things just set us off. And next, if you get, and so stress is absolutely the royal road into every mental malady there is, right? So when you're stressed out and anxious and afraid and angry and this gamish of emotions, it tees you up to get depressed. It tees you up to get anxious. If you have a genetic vulnerability for more serious conditions like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, stress is a major, major driver of the development of those illnesses. Next. And yeah, stress is not something that just exists in the brain. So we know now from thousands of studies that when the brain perceives danger, when the brain has a feeling that the individual is at risk, it doesn't just make us anxious and depressed. It has these rather profound effects on our body. So again, you know, the world has always been a challenging place, and you know, organisms that didn't have ways of responding to real dangers didn't stick around to leave their genes in the gene pool for the next generation. So we have these very finely wired stress systems, and so when we perceive danger, all these chemicals get activated in our body and brain that get us ready to either to fight or to flight mostly. And because stress so often across evolution meant you were about to get torn up or bitten or wounded, our bodies have evolved this nifty thing where when we feel psychologically stressed, it turns on our inflammatory immune system so that our immune system can be ready for, you know, if you get your bite, you need to have all your immune molecules to keep of dying of infection. So we get this conglomerate stress inflammatory activation when we perceive danger. Next, Tim. The problem is that all of us, it's like an old song from the 70s by Jethro Tull, we're all living in the past. So we have brains and bodies that were wired for the African savanna, for these very, you know, intense stressors and these massive physical reactions, for dangers that were very, very real across evolution. We need those systems when real dangers present themselves to us still, but most of us, many of us nowadays, spend our lives worrying about stuff that are really overrated. We see threat at all sorts of places where we would do better to see opportunity. Next. And so, yeah, if you can hit next, Tim. So, you know, the stress system and the inflammatory pathways, these pathways in the body, they give you the energy to run from the tiger, and they help your body survive infection, but they come at a cost to the body and the brain. So that over time, if you're always stressed out and you're wandering around with overactivation of these systems, in the body, you're set up for heart disease, diabetes, dementia, cancer. In the brain, you're set up for depression, anxiety, burnout. Next. And, you know, the sad thing is that, you know, if this conglomerate of danger system activity that is stress and inflammation, if it manifests primarily in physical illnesses, those are all huge risk factors for depression and anxiety. Next. And conversely, sadly, we know that if you spend your life depressed and anxious, you're more likely to develop heart disease, dementia, diabetes, and cancer later in life. So it's this very, very nasty feed-forward circuit, and all this stuff is running rampant in our lives now because these ancient pathways are confused by this really crazy modern world we live in. And God knows COVID has activated all this stuff. So next, there's increasing evidence, and we've been interested for years in the idea that meditation may aid in this process, particularly compassion meditation practices, because these are practices that are really aimed to help you revisualize the world so that you're not a fool. You don't quit recognizing danger, but you don't see danger in every bush. You tend to recognize the world more as a field of opportunity than an arena of threat and danger. So, when one engages in these practices, and if you can hit next, Tim, the goal here is to shrink down the over importance we place on so many of these modern sort of things that drive us crazy, and see them more realistically, more practically. And when we do that next, we can lower the stress system, inflammatory chronic activation. We lower the cost of the body and the brain. We reduce our risk of these sorts of conditions. So it's interesting that although it really, my interest in meditation and my interest in the ideas behind it started for my own personal well-being, I've been fortunate over the years that it's opened a doorway to this whole line of research. And now, of course, the slide I've shown you is not just a compassion meditation slide. This idea about how stress contributes to sickness in the last 20 years has become widely adopted as we've recognized how true it is. So it's really exciting that today we're able to talk about meditation and its benefits, not just from our personal experience, which is, such a powerful thing in itself, but from science, which is increasingly suggesting that when these practices are engaged in, they can produce real benefits for the body and the mind. That's it, Tim.
Okay. Wow. Thank you, Chuck. That is a science lesson in a short while, but it's so relevant. And I love that you bookended it with your own experience, and that experience many of us have had when we sit down to look at our mind and see how self-centered it is, how obsessed with ourselves we can become. So I look forward to exploring that theme as we go forward. Let me do a little introduction for someone who many of you probably know already. Lobsang Tenzin Negi. He is the executive director of the Center for Contemplative Science and Compassion-Based Ethics at Emory. He founded the center, which is an evolution of the Emory-Tibet partnership, which began years ago in the it was gestating in the 90s even. So it's been around a while, and it's a number of successful programs based on this coming together of East and West through the culture of Tibet and Tibetan Buddhism and the science and humanities programs at Emory University. So he has got a Geshe degree from the monastery, and that's why you'll often hear us calling him Geshe Lobsang or Geshe La. So without further ado, Geshe La.
Thank you, Tim, for that lovely introduction. I want to begin by just really expressing my incredibly good fortune, first of all, to be part of this panel with such dear friends. Two of the people that I have a lot to be grateful to, in our own work here at Emory University. Lexi Patampkin has, as you heard, has been a dear friend, a sister, that supporter for all these years, the 20-some years now. And I learned a lot, actually, from Lexi over the years when it comes to how to be a human, not just in theory, but more about how to live that, how to embody. My good friend Chuck, that as you heard, for me, understand meditation, some of the mechanism from scientific perspective has really come from Chuck, as he beautifully articulated in this basic mechanism, underlying stress and how that can be detrimental, but that's also part of it is our natural kind of response to threats or perceived threats in life. So this is really wonderful. I want to thank you for both of you for being part of this panel, and of course, Tim is a beautiful soul. When it comes to compassion, he embodies so beautifully. That's so rightly so overseeing our CBCT, this cognitively based compassion training at Emory University. My own personal experience with the meditation, actually, that this came very early. Not that I knew about how to do meditation, what really is meditation about, but at a very young age, like maybe 5 or 6 years of age, growing up in the Himalayas in a Buddhist culture. My own father was a kind of the healer, the Buddhist healer, and then growing up in that company, that had just great fascination and this, the curiosity about the meditation and interest. But it was when I was age 14, that's when an opportunity opened up. I was very fortunate to have been received as one of the 3 kids from this kind of the remote Himalayan valley called Kinnaur, by His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala, and that's really where more formally for me my spiritual journey began. I studied formally, of course, but it was after coming to America in 1991, and since I was sent to America by my monastery, Tribung Leslie Monastery, I was a monk, that not anymore, but I was sent here to set up a small meditation center and teach, and in the beginning, I was really struggling, because we have studied meditations and as a way to, to cultivate those inner paths, with the inner realizations for Buddhahood, attaining Buddhahood, for the liberation from samsara and like that. And here, that is, of course, there are a number of people interested in that, but many more people are interested about how meditations can help our everyday life now, here, and that's where I think that, for me, it was a kind of learning curve to see how can we convey, these teachings, meditation practices in a way that makes sense. And that's where my interest in exploring Western psychology, and then also, that some of the emerging fields in Western sciences that addressed mind and emotions and like that. For me, when it comes to emotions, it's really the meditation. It's about. I said that meditation is a training, but it's a training about inner skills. Developing compassion, or how to be more mindful, how to have better attention. These are all inner skills, and those skills, like any other skill, can be enhanced, and that process by which it is enhanced is what I call meditation. That we can talk about why do we need meditation. Nothing kind of mysterious. It's a basic psychology, basic way if we can understand how our emotions work, how our mind works, and then how to have a better self-awareness, how to then have greater control over our own, emotional life, if you will. That's what the meditation is about. So over the years, for me, these two concepts that His Holiness the Dalai Lama has spoken extensively, that one has to do with emotional hygiene. He talks about, in order to, keep ourselves healthy physically, we do need to maintain physical hygiene. And through that, we know that how much, improvement in our understanding of health has evolved over the years. Similarly, he says that we need to have the emotional hygiene. And that's where how do we go about cultivating emotional hygiene? That's one part. Secondly, he talks about, the emotional immunity. When we talk about, how we can, when confronted with certain illnesses, let's say COVID-19 that we are faced with right now, that how can we remain healthy, or if we do get infected, how can we deal with this? I think this concept of emotional, immunity and the emotional hygiene too are very relevant. If you look at that right now with the coronavirus infection, what are we hearing from the health professionals, in terms of to maintaining our health? We need to maintain the hand hygiene, in order to really kind of maintain that hygiene, we need to make sure that we don't, to come too close to people. We maintain physical distancing. If we must interact with others in a close proximity, wear face masks. All of these are as a way to kind of to maintain, a certain health, physical, in this case, protect ourselves from this virus. But also we are working towards developing vaccine, that to give us immunity. When we do have that vaccine developed, and if we can introduce that to our system, immune system, and it can learn to then, when actually kind of intruded by this COVID virus, our immune system has learned to how to fight with it, to protect. So similarly, when it comes to meditation, emotional hygiene has to do with how we can maintain that emotional hygiene is by being aware of the various fears and worries and the distresses, and like hand washing. What can we do? That can we do we just remain stuck there, or redirect our attention to something that may be comforting, that may be, that brings a certain sense of calm and a sense of security. Whether it's just bringing attention to the breath for a few moments, to let those distresses calm, those emotional sparks kind of the calm. That's one thing we can, in the meditation, we know, like this attention training, mindfulness training, is about developing our ability to notice our impulses and those distresses, have greater flexibility to disengage, redirect our attention where we need to, and to be able to sustain where we need to sustain. That is comforting. That's one thing that I see it. With the immunity part, this is about, I think that we have to, when it comes to emotional immunity, whether has to do with, the various ups and downs in life happen, to what extent we can develop an awareness, understanding about those, our human condition, being human with our own strengths and the vulnerabilities and so forth. If we are able to attune, to those realities of our human condition, then when we are confronted with various ups and downs in life, that we will have a certain immunity, emotional immunity, in the sense that when things go wrong, they may not become devastating, because in some ways that we are able to put those in perspective. So, meditation to me is in that sense, it's a training of our inner mental states, inner skills. Fortunately, nature has endowed us already as social beings with those kind of the roots of those skills already. It's about using our enhanced mental capacity in brain to really deliberately, more kind of systematically, to train so that we have those inner resources to deal with the everyday, the challenges in life. Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe Lobsang. That's really interesting perspective on meditation, that it might be some type of way to gain a mental immunity or an inner immunity, similar to the physical immunity that we may have from antibodies being exposed to certain viruses. It occurs to me, listening to all three of you, that there's this we're really at this amazing nexus of coming together of what might, when I was young, might have been categorized as this is all spiritual ideas over here, and this is all scientific ideas over here. And so we have such a great group gathered that could address this. And I would just want to maybe offer that as a theme to hear your reflections on whether, especially Chuck, if it feels like the world of science is developing certain tools or skill capacities to measure things. Does this idea make sense of mental immunity from a more scientific or hard science perspective? And then also, what does this tell us about how we can I don't want to ask too much at once, but I'm thinking about, our theme here is challenging times, during challenging times. So just keeping that in mind as we have our conversation.
Well, I'll make a couple of comments. Yeah, I think it's quite right. So, one of the things I've always greatly admired about His Holiness and Geshe-la is making demarcation between elements of belief systems that may be true or may not be true, but are not able to be scientifically evaluated rigorously currently, something like reincarnation, for instance, right? On the other hand, there are other strands in religious traditions. Of course, I've mostly worked within Buddhism in this regard, that line up incredibly well with modern science, right? So, this Buddhism has this core idea that life is inherently difficult, and that there's these three sort of mental states that are really, bad that way, or the kleshas, the avarice, desiring, disliking, hating, pulling back, and ignorance. And, I've realized that this lines up so remarkably with evolutionary theory and this idea that, if you look at what do organisms do to survive and reproduce, they're drawn to that which is going to benefit them, like food. They retreat from that which is dangerous for them, like predators. And most organisms spend the vast bulk of their existence ignoring as much as possible to sort of keep focused like that, right? That is the samsaric mind, if we could use a Buddhist word. And there's an example of how, Buddhist understandings and evolutionary understandings they just lay right on top of each other. I think in general, the realization that setting aside, questions of whether humans have souls or things like this, but the realization that consciousness exists, that it's important, that it needs to be studied and understood, has taken a quantum leap in the last decade. And along with that, I think is a realization that one of the characteristics to one degree or other in humans is a desire for something that transcends the mundane, the personal, what we're sort of talking about being locked in your own head. So yes, I see a huge movement in science in these directions, and I think it's really promising. And we can talk about the immunity, but I don't want to totally hog the stage.
Well, no, thank you for that reflection. Others have remarks about that?
I would just say that meditation is mental immunity, and neuroscience is backing this up, and they're showing that. And it's wonderful to see the spiritual communities and the scientific communities all working together. And there's that beautiful documentary by His Holiness the Dalai Lama called Dalai Lama Scientist. And I encourage everyone to watch it, because indeed, that's where the breakthroughs and great deep understandings will come from, in my opinion.
Thank you. Yes, for reminding us. His Holiness the Dalai Lama is a distinguished visiting faculty member at Emory University. And of course, I haven't mentioned that yet, but he's been a big inspiration for many of the programs. So thank you. That his dialogues with science have been essential to the work we're doing. Maybe we could shift a little toward the practical side of things. One of the reasons we're here are the challenges that we as a society are facing. And when I say society, I just become aware that I can no longer think of that in this limited way, just like, well, us at Emory or Georgia or even the United States. You know, coronavirus has made it so clear that we are not able to draw a line around, you know, our people and say, you know, let's just make my people happy and to heck with everyone else. This is not, it's never made sense, but coronavirus has really exposed the faulty thinking in that. So, and yet there's a very immediate, these are big ideas, but there's a very immediate need that we have to, you know, as the t-shirts say, stay calm and carry on. And what can meditation offer for that? Is there anything that it can do right away? How long does this mental immunity take? A long time to develop? It's not just a virus, it's political unrest in our country, and many countries are feeling a great kind of tear in the fabric of society between different political sides. The awareness in the United States is growing awareness of the racial injustice that it's always been there, but the awareness of it has sometimes difficult to face and should be faced, but still it comes with a certain amount of anxiety and uncertainty. So, you know, what practical advice can you all offer?
Lexi, please go ahead.
You want me to? Well, again, I think it's our internal world that will guide us through the darkest of times in our life. And developing that internal world for me started with establishing a meditative practice. And it can be 5 minutes a day. You know, if you've never done it before, spend 5 minutes, you know, focusing on breath, doing a quick body scan, you know, releasing tension in your body. You can start out small, you know, take baby steps, and you can build upon that. But it's always starting from within. And I encourage people to do that. 5 minutes a day in the morning, 5 at night. Build it up to 15 and 15. It makes a huge difference. Again, compassion and love, you know, shines from within ourselves and is developed from within. And that's what gives us the resiliency. When I think about losing my father at 20, I didn't have this kind of resiliency that I have now because I didn't have a meditative practice at 20. I wish I would have. It was books like As a Man Thinketh. I remember I was 20 and I picked up this book and the first line said, "You are literally what you think you are." And that really took me back at 20, and I started thinking about that. Wow, I have to control my mind. I have to think about what I'm thinking. You know, in psychology terms, it's like that positive self-talk. You know, I had to talk myself through that at 20. I can get through this. You know, I'm so in pain. I don't know how I'm going to live without my dad. I had to do all this soothing myself, but I learned to become stronger and more resilient from doing that. But it was those kinds of practices. It was all the inner work that made me a stronger person to go through that adversity. And COVID is a crisis. You know, we're all grieving, and grieving is a process. It takes time. You know, we start out in grieving, we're angry. We've lost something we love dearly. And with COVID, it could be a loved one that we've lost. So we're really grieving the loss of a loved one. We're grieving our lives the way we used to live them. And yet it's an opportunity to create more self-discovery and awareness about ourselves and develop this rich inner world. And I just encourage people on a practical level to start out 5 minutes a day in the morning and 5 at night and build from there. You know, focusing on breath, closing your eyes, relaxing the body.
That's wonderful.
Thank
Keep it simple. And you know, we were opening to questions from the attendees now. There's one here I feel like may be a kind of next follow-on to what you were just saying, Lexi. How do you bring more loving kindness to your meditation? So I wonder if maybe Lobsang, would you feel free to comment on that?
Sure, just very briefly. You know, as I was saying, the meditation is really a training. You know, that it's training is what is training? Training is a process by which we enhance certain skills. So a skill can be a perspective also. You know, from that perspective, as Lexi was saying, that, you know, you are what you believe, you know, what your perspective, your thoughts are what you become, what you are. In other words, to say that our worldview, or the, you know, the framework, what we have of us and the world around, that those lead to certain emotional way of relating to the events in our lives. So loving kindness, compassion, how do we bring about in our lives through meditation is, for me, you know, from the tradition that I come from, this the Buddhist tradition, Indo-Tibetan Buddhist tradition, particularly with the focus on cognitive approach, you know, this what is called the analytical meditation. It's about how to make visible, you know, making visible our human condition. If we can relate to ourselves as humans, you know, as humans, we have needs, you know, animals have needs also, yet as living beings. We have certain strengths, certain vulnerabilities, certain limitations in life, you know, like that this is part and parcel of being a human. If we can, you know, embrace that reality, to kind of make that visible and train in this way that make that our default mode of, you know, our perspective, you know, that habit, in other words, is this kind of a mindset, be it, you know, lens of our mind, be that where we can embrace our human condition. Then it's very, you know, it becomes easier to connect to others by recognizing their humanity, their human condition. They too are humans, just like us. They want to be happy, to want to be free from suffering. They want to be safe, you know, just like us. They have needs and goals and dreams and so forth, but also they have certain limitations, vulnerabilities. They do fail, even in behavior, in the attitude, you know, because so much of that, how we react, and also depend on what kind of dispositions we have, what kind of environment around that shapes, you know, our reactions and so forth. So if we can do that, then we would not be seeing others as evil, you know, like that, and ourselves as pious and like that, but rather we all are humans. Except in being human is what is at the heart of, you know, giving rise to us, enhancing, expanding that compassion and loving kindness for oneself and for others.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I'm seeing a question here about how do you, let's see if I can read it out loud. How to make tools like CBCT and other mind or emotional training available to more and more people? I assume this person, thank you for the question, is seeing this huge need. Actually, they say that here. How do you get these resources out to a larger audience? Maybe that gives you a chance. I know, Lexi, this has been an interest of yours and your support of the C Learning program. Would you care to share a little about that?
Well, yes, I heard about the C Learning program from Geshe-la a few years ago. And the more I learned about it, social, emotional, ethical learning. You know, we've always supported educational programs, but we believe C program will change the world. And it is available where you can get training. It's free online at the Emory website. But it is so important. If we can, from a young age, teach children to have those resiliency skills and to understand their emotional world. You know, this emotional intelligence is so important, and to be kind and compassionate toward themselves and other children, and they carry that through adulthood, we will indeed change the world. And the curriculum is stellar. I mean, there's workbooks in every language. It's amazing. We brought it here to the Aspen High School. Megan Noonan spearheaded that up. And to see high schoolers saying, I feel like I could handle this now, this criticism. I'm more resilient because I actually have an inner world, or I've learned things. And I know during this COVID crisis, the C-Learning team is providing material for at-home activities for children. And Geshe-la can tell you more about that.
At the Center for Contemplative Science and Compassion-Based Ethics at Emory, we really draw our inspirations, our guidance from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Each, I guess, epoch or the time in the history, there are certain crucial times. For us in the late 20th and 21st century now, I think the humanity is at its juncture. I think that if we continue to go kind of separate ways, the spirituality and the science, that divide, they will only kind of underprivilege us as humans, but if we can bring this together, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been, the champion for that. He had this vision for like 40 years now and worked tirelessly to bring us together so that we have the best of both what the science, is, shedding light on, and what the ancient, spiritual traditions around the world have understood. And so here we have an opportunity to have much richer, kind of more holistic, fuller understanding of human condition to face the various challenges that humanity will face. And we have been so fortunate that His Holiness has, provided that vision and guidance at Emory University for us in the last 20 years or so, at programs like CBCT for really how compassion is understood and practiced. Recently, we have embarked on C-Learning, Social, Emotion, and Ethical Learning. His Holiness has been writing about this for a long time because, to really ensure that humanity continue to flourish, we have to, not along with our technical knowledge, we need to have the, teach how to be human, that with good heart, making right and healthy decisions, managing our own emotions and interpersonal relationship, and making decisions that are, healthy for the larger, context, the environment, and so forth and so on. So, C-Learning at Emory, that we have incredible team, and many advisors have been helping. Was launched last year, and it's now already in many countries. Like over 13,000 or so educators and parents have taken just our basic C101 from online course from about 145 countries. It's really encouraging. During this pandemic, in this period when we are in the middle of whether schools should open or not open, or even before when we had to have the stay home, practices that we need to stay home. This C-Learning team, we did not stop. We continue to see how we can bring this. So one of the things we did was for children as they are, together with the parents, what kind of, at-home activities we can do. So one of the things that you can see is the, in what a kind of worksheet and so forth we provide, or it's online, you can access from clearning.emory.edu. For example, what is not cancelled? You may have seen on the television and so forth. During difficult times, as earlier Chuck mentioned, that when our tendency is to kind of just in that survival mode, only see what is wrong. But rather, if we can, take a moment to see what is not cancelled, and then have the children reflect on that, make their own list, and then even draw, and then as they are doing that, check in with their own feelings, how they are feeling, is that's making them less, distressed, and these are the ways to really helping children to identify their own emotions, find ways to see for themselves that how they can, transform them, how they can be more resilient, that not remain stuck in certain distress and upsets and like that. And then most of all, also work together. This is a great opportunity to build this, bonding with the parents and like that. So that we have a lot of these activities, a number of activities. It's free. Anyone can access this and other resources through our website, clearning.emory.edu.
We just have a few minutes left, and there's a couple of questions here that I'd love to put to you. I hope these don't feel like a curveball, but they both seem to go together in some ways. One is about balancing our focus on external elements of our life versus our internal needs or inner capacity. And what I'm hearing in that is a sense of, well, yeah, of course, I need to take care of my inner life, but also I need to also do the things that take care of my outer life. I still need a job. If I'm unemployed, I need to, get food to eat. So how do I find the balance here? And then the other one that seems to go with that, on the one hand, we need to go out of our mind to get healthy, go out of the mind to get healthy, but all the meditations are in the mind. How do we make sense of this contradiction? So I feel like both of these are asking this really interesting question. There's a little tension, what's the focus here? Is it inner or outer? So what are your thoughts about that?
Veshel is the expert on that.
No, please go ahead. Two of you, Chuck and both of you. I have spoken enough, taken enough time, so please.
Well, I'll just say one pragmatic thing, which is, I think one of the simplest ways that I understand meditative practices is really what they help somebody do is see the world more clearly, more realistically, right? So that your own projections and preconceptions and issues are not as likely to color everything you do, so that you see threats more realistically, you don't ignore them. You see opportunities more realistically, you don't lose them as often, right? And so this is a genuinely rough time. I mean, this is, the virus, there's a Buddhist scholar named Shantideva who talks about the benefits that enemies can provide. If there's a benefit that this virus is trying to provide to us, it's realizing that we cannot continue with this completely interdependent human world without expanding our interdependent concerns to look at the entire biotic environment. These are rough times, right? And so it's not that you want to escape into your mind or out of your mind. I think what's really helpful is you don't want to add to the weight of what's already very, very difficult, right? You want to be able to see it clearly so you can react most effectively. I think for the simplest way, that would be one answer to that. The other questions beyond my pay grade, I'm going to punt that to Geshe-la, but.
Please, Lexi, if you have any thoughts on those questions.
Well, I think, obviously we have our day-to-day activities and responsibilities, of taking care of ourselves and others, and we should not neglect those. But again, as I said earlier, I think we all have 5 minutes a day to spend a little time doing a quick body check, relaxing, spending a little time inwardly, and you can build from there. But it's just important, it's like brushing your teeth every day. To have a 5-minute practice every day is cumulative and it matters. And start out small if you're a beginner. But of course not neglect our day-to-day responsibilities that we all have, and we're feeling it even more so during this COVID crisis. But at the same time that we have this COVID crisis going on, it is an opportunity for self-discovery. That's the silver lining.
Thank you. I will just, since we're running out of the time, I just invoke one of the early Buddhist masters known as Aryadeva. He says that, and this may be, relevant here to in terms of those questions. He says that underprivileged struggle is, a primary struggle primarily struggles with the physical needs. The privileged struggles with the, inner needs, inner resources. So there's something that we cannot neglect the physical needs. We have these bodies. We need, if we are hungry, we need food to nurture our, the body. If we are thirsty, we need water. That we need other people as a social being. But also there are the inner kind of resources also, that if we are, unable to have a certain ability to regulate our emotions, awareness of what we are experiencing, and have certain, capacity to regulate those emotions, that we will be at a disadvantage. So the goal is, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been, encouraging, it's not either or. It's kind of, we need to combine both, and that's why the learning from what the science is showing, but also learning from those inner scientists who have learned a lot about how to understand the inner world and how to work with them. It's about bringing both of those together, and I think that we are in a very good position, in the human history, to have these two domains of knowledge really come together and complement each other in creating a more kind of fuller, understanding of human condition.
Thank you so much for that. I think that's a wonderful way to end our hour together. And it's just been a pleasure to be with the three of you who I see on the screen, and then the many dozens of others who are with us. So I wish we could see everyone, but that's just not the way the world is designed right now. So, well, thank you all for coming. And we hope you've gotten something out of this. I know I have. And be in touch. Reach out to us with any questions, and we look forward to hearing from you. So.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you again for our wonderful panelists.
Yeah.
And Jack.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for giving us a chance to be here with you. All right, bye, everybody.
Bye.